الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So we continue in the matan, and here now we get to who is obligated to fast in Ramadan. ويلزم الصوم لكل مسلم مكلف قادر. So there's three things the muallif mentions here. يلزم يعني it's lazim. What does lazim mean? It's obligatory. We know from the Quran itself and the Sahih ahadith that are mutawatir regarding the farida of a siyam, and we know from the ijma of the ummah. So we have the Quran, authentic ahadith through numerous different wordings, mutawatir in ma'na, and through the consensus of the ummah that fasting the month of Ramadan is obligatory. But who is obligated to fast? This is where we get some confusion in the ummah today. So we'll talk about. So the muallif mentions three things. أولا المسلم, يعني the person should be Muslim. Mukallaf, يعني the one who is obligated, the one who has that taklif, that obligation upon them. And qadir, the one who is able. Some of the shuruh, and I will add here, will mention the fourth being muqim. Right? And a fifth I will mention also from my own notes, which is where they are free from any mumani', anything that is restricting them from fasting. For example, hayd and nifas and so on. Tayyib. So now we have three that are in the matan, but with the explanation now you have five. But even then we can break it down a little bit more to understand. First thing, Muslim, that's clear. We don't obligate non-Muslims to fast. So even if you live in a Muslim country and under the Sharia, you cannot force a non-Muslim to fast. You could tell them that in Ramadan you cannot eat outside. Just like you have laws for decency of society, but you cannot force them to fast because this is an ibadah, this is a worship. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not obligate those ibadat except on those who are willing to accept it because they bring thawab, reward. And this is from, alhamdulillah, the beauty of Sharia. At the same time, just to be clear, if you do live as a non-Muslim under the Islamic rule, there are criminal laws that you still have to follow. Don't think that it means that you can steal and stuff and you're like, in my religion it's okay. No, obviously not. But those things that are worships, or ibadat, like zakat and saum and salah, you do not obligate on the non-Muslims. You give them the freedom to practice their religion. Tayyib. So the first thing being Muslim. Next thing, mukallaf. Who has taklif, who has obligation. Here you have a few aspects. One, under the subcategories you could say, is bulugh. A child under bulugh is not obligated to fast. Now, should they fast? Yes. There are, and we'll talk about at what age you should start to encourage the children to fast, but you should encourage children to fast. Obviously not so young that it would harm their health. So if we look at the hadith about salah, you encourage your children at 7 and you are consistent with it at 10. So at a young age you should start to encourage your children, even if they're not fasting with all the ahkam. If they're breaking some of the rules, it's okay. But teach them, encourage them. And when they get close to bulugh, start to be strict about it. Why? You don't want to be like, no, there's no fasting, it's a child, and then one day bulugh hits and that's it. 30 days of Ramadan and now you're, and this is not the way of tarbiyah. And you should start giving the virtues of fasting, showing a good example and so on. But if we talk about obligation, who is it fard on? Then a child under bulugh does not have the obligation to fast. Tayyib. A second subcategory under mukallaf is aqil, somebody who has sane abilities to discern and decide. Right? If somebody's in a coma, you don't go to them and turn off their food supply all day in Ramadan. La. Or if somebody doesn't have the mental capacity, they're challenged, mentally challenged, where they don't know right from wrong. Obviously, I mean, it depends on their level. I mean, some people just maybe a little, and if you fail a few tests, doesn't mean you don't have to fast. But if the person is really at such a level where they don't know right from wrong, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He takes something away, He then makes something easy for them. So they are not obligated with these things. Tell you, what is the dalil? The dalil here is the hadith that is reported in the Muslim Imam Ahmad, in the Sunan of Abu Dawud, Ibn Nahwi, which is well known as Ibn Mulaqin, in Badr al-Munir. He authenticated to be sahih. The Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, "Rufiya al-qalam ala thalatha." The pen is lifted from the three. One of them being the insane person or the person who has lost their mind until they regain it, and the child until they hit bulugh, and the sleeping person until they wake up. And this hadith, subhanallah, is such a jami' hadith. It's used in so many aspects of fiqh. Here we use it, okay. So the one under majnoon would be ghair aqil here. Yani somebody who doesn't have the ability to understand what they're doing. So here, if they don't know yani what fasting is and so on, the obligation, they don't have the ability to comprehend all of that, then Allah will not obligate it upon them. Allah does not put a burden upon anybody more than they can bear. So here from this hadith and from ayat and others, we will not obligate them to fast. Tayyib. A child until bulugh. So this is a clear dalil for that hukam. And the sleeping person until they wake up. Now here, this is usually used for salah and so on. But even in fasting, if somebody is fasting but they are asleep, and we will use this hadith interestingly in an aspect that we'll discuss a little bit later, that if somebody is not in a coma, they're perfectly fine, but they sleep the whole day of Ramadan. Now, this is just a fiqh discussion. Obviously, you should wake up for your salawat. It's not like you can sleep, nor should you. You shouldn't just sleep all day in Ramadan, wake up to pray, and then go back to sleep all day. This is not the way. This is what we see in many Muslim countries and things today. But a Muslim should be productive in Ramadan. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, many of the jihad that we see in the zaman of Nabi alayhi salatu were in Ramadan, and many of them were even fasting during those times. So a person should be productive in Ramadan, and I personally am more productive at work in Ramadan than outside of Ramadan, because then I don't worry about breaks and coffee and lunch or anything else, and I don't want to think about food, so I focus on work. So that is regarding the hadith, if the one who is sleeping is not judged, meaning if somebody sleeps to the day of Ramadan but they made the niyyah and they did everything else, their sawm is still correct based on this hadith. Tayyib. So then the third thing mentioned in the matan, and we'll talk about the one who is qadir, the one who is able. Tayyib. And many adillah there. First and foremost, as we mentioned, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not put a burden illa wasi'a, except what they can bear. Tayyib. So here, based on this and the ayat of Quran that fear Allah as much as you can and other adillah, it's very clear that if you're not qadir, if you're not able to fast, let's say you have a health issue, you're marid, you're sick, well, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to put a burden upon you more than you can handle. So you do not have to fast. And we'll talk about different types of sickness and that coming up inshaAllah. Tayyib, we added to that muqim, right? Because of the ayat of Quran regarding safar and fasting and many sahih ahadith, and we'll discuss those a little bit later when we talk about different types of breaking and making up a fast and things. But because of that, I added to the three with being muqim. And then lastly I added, which is regarding being free from the things that would stop you from fasting. Meaning, for example, a woman who was in nifas or hayd, she is not obligated to fast. And the hadith of Aisha radhiyallahu anha is a sahih dalil for that in Al-Bukhari, where she said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered us to make up the fast, but not to make up the salawat, during time of hayd. So what does that tell you? From a dalil that a person in hayd is not obligated to fast. And nifas takes the ruling of hayd. Tayyib. Now the muallif continues. Everybody got those 5 categories? One of them having 2 subcategories, inshallah. The muallif continues. وَإِذَا قَامَتْ الْبَيِّنَةِ, if the proof is established في أثناء النهار وجب الإمساك والقضاء. طيب. This is an interesting mas'ala. What if you go out to check for the moon on the 29th of Sha'ban, and nobody sees the moon. So the next day, what do? Do you fast or not?
No.
You do not. Clear night, nobody saw the moon, you don't fast. Now you begin your day, alhamdulillah, you have breakfast with your family, you're all good, and somebody comes and says, I saw the moon last night. Or a news that didn't come out comes and says, and that is established, yani it is accredited, is accepted, that yes, the moon was sighted last night. What do we do in this scenario? Now we have two issues we're dealing with. One mas'ala is you already ate, right? Second mas'ala is now you know this is Ramadan because the witness has been accepted. Now, if a news comes out and the witness is not accepted, that's a different issue. If it's not accepted, then khalas, yani you continue your day. But in this scenario, إذا قامت البين, and the Muallif says that if the hujjah, the report has been accepted, the hujjah is established on you. Here he says, then you do imsak and qada. Yani you do not eat the rest of the day. Whenever you heard the news, whenever it was established, from then on till Maghrib, you don't eat. But you still have to make up that day. Tayyib. There are many adilla here. I'll mention first regarding why do you have to stop eating, right? Because as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered in the Quran, and we mentioned all the adilla earlier, that when Ramadan is established, when it has been enforced, you have to then fast. So you can't be like, okay, we know it's Ramadan, but I'm just going to go ahead and eat. No. That is why imsak is there, right? You don't have any of the exceptions that we mentioned. And you're Muslim, you're Muqim, we mentioned the 5 things and you're fine. So now you have to fast. But if you are going to fast the rest of the day, why do you have to make it up? Because the hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, and this is a hadith reported by Hafsa, is reported by Imam Ahmad in his Musnad and Imam Abu Dawud in his Sunan, and Shaykh al-Albani, for example, and other A'imma and Ulama like Ibn al-Mulaqi and others considered to be Sahih, that whoever does not yajmi', yani does not bring the fasting starting as-siyam qabla al-fajr, fala siyam lahu. Whoever doesn't bring together the intention, and this is for the fard fasting obviously, from before fajr, there is no fast for him. Tayyib, so what does that mean? Nafal fasting, you could even fast as long as you didn't eat if you woke up late. Like meaning you wake up, you pray Fajr, you didn't eat anything, you weren't planning on fasting. And this happened with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then you decide, you know what, I'm gonna fast. There's nothing to eat, I'm gonna fast. Nafal fasting, but al-fard, you have to have a niyyah. And if you didn't begin it from Fajr, the fard fast is not acceptable. So here, based on this hadith, we say that there is also qada, and you also have to make it up. The Muallif continues that kada al-ha'idun, and the same is true for the ha'id or the nufasa, yani the one in nifas, if they get their tahara, or the musafir who, let's go first those two. So now we talked about a case scenario, which is that you began your day not intending to fast. So because the obligation wasn't established on you, so you were eating and drinking or whatever, and then you got the news that day is Ramadan, so it established the hujjah on you, so you do imsak, but then you have to make up the day as well, right? Tayyib. Now this is true for the woman who is in hayd or nifas as well, meaning that there is I'm not going to get into detail here, but there is a sign of tahara that comes at the end of nifas. It's a type of a discharge, a whitish discharge. So if a woman gets that during the day, let's say at dhuhr time, now she knows that her hayd is finished. So here, her days are up, her hayd is finished, she has clear sign, so she has to make ghusl and she has to start salah. Like you cannot say, you know what, I'm not going to pray the rest of the day. La. So just in the same way, now Ramadan is fard on her. Meaning during Ramadan, if she gets her hayd or her nifas ends. What is nifas? Nifas is the bleeding post childbirth bleeding. Something like that, right? And here, when you have nifas, people say 40 days. 40 days is a maximum, right? Minimum, you could have no days. I mean, there are cases where there were childbirths that were totally bloodless or so on, But most people will have around 40 days of bleeding, but this is a maximum. If your bleeding stops in 3 days or 7 days or 10 days or 20 days or 30 days or 36 days, when the bleeding stops, you have to make ghusl and start salawat and fasting and everything. You don't just go, my bleeding stopped, but I'm going to ride out the rest of the 40 days anyway. Right? Now, what if you go past 40 days? Then istihada. Then it is irregular bleeding. Then you have to make ghusl, and even though there's blood, you will now make salah and fast and all of that. So 40 days, is clearly in the hadith, is a maximum, not a minimum. So if the nifas ends, bleeding stops in the daytime in Ramadan, and she knows it's finished, then she has to go make ghusl. Now the same scenario comes for the person who receives this type of a hujjah, this type of a bayyinah, this type of a evidence, like the one who found out it was Ramadan. Meaning, why were they not fasting in these cases? They were not fasting because of the mumani', the thing that prevents you, which is hayd or nifas. Now that that's gone, the obligation of Ramadan begins. You can't just be like, Ishraq time, I'm clean, but I'm just going to not fast the rest of the day anyway because I didn't begin fasting. No, this is what most people do. But this is wrong. It is just like somebody who now salah is fard on her and she's like, I'm good. I'm not going to pray dhuhr, asr, maghrib, isha. La. And once the obligation comes, you have to be obligated. But now, do they have to make up that day? Yes. Because they didn't fast the whole day. I mentioned the hadith earlier. So the same scenario is there. Also for the traveler that began their day traveling but became muqim in that day. Meaning, I'm a traveler, and as we'll discuss travelers a little bit more, inshallah, coming up. But from the Quran and Sahih Ahadith, fasting is not obligated on me as a traveler. Okay. So let's say I'm traveling and I fly into LAX, at Fajr time. I'm still a traveler. I'm not in San Diego. I'm not in La Mesa. I'm out. Now, by the time I get home, let's say it's before Asr time. Now I'm at home, Asr time, but I didn't begin my day fasting. I was traveling. So what was the reason I wasn't fasting is because of being musafir. Now that I'm home, am I musafir? La, I'm muqim. So that rukhsa that I had is gone. So now I cannot just be like, all right, you guys keep fasting. I'm going to go get to the kitchen and I'm going to go make myself a sandwich. La. Here then you have to do imsak. You have to not eat. But does that mean that that fast counts? No, because I was eating earlier at LAX, I was chomping away. So that day has to have qada as well. So there are now these, how many case scenarios have you done? 4, right? The one during the regular person, during the time where they didn't know it was going to be Ramadan, and the bayyinah or the hujjah was established upon them. So they even began their day not fasting, but they will make imsak for the rest of the day because now the obligation of Ramadan is there, and they will do qada, they will make it up. 2 others that we meant after that, to make it 3 will be hayd and nifas. They got their tuhur, they got their notification of cleanliness in the daytime when it was an obligatory fast. Now they have to do ghusl, start their salah, make imsak, do not eat until maghrib, and make qada of that day. And the 4th now, because that's 3, 4th is the one who started out as a musafir but became muqim in the daytime in Ramadan. Then they will make imsak, they will not eat and drink and stay away from that which Allah has forbidden during fasting until maghrib, and they will make qada for that day. Tayyib. Now, the next we will talk about a few categories, and I want to I want to make a mental graph for you guys. If you have pens and papers or iPads and tablets, nowadays everybody's high tech, mashallah, then start to make a graph. If not, then just, you guys will Imam Bukhari it, just memorize everything I say and mentally make out a graph. We're going to divide people into 6 categories now. And I'm going to go through the matan, but I really want you to understand Surah Al-Mas'ala, yani what are we discussing? I don't want you to just go through the dars and then to be like, yeah, it was a great dars, what do you remember? No. I want you to understand these masail, and that's why I give you these lists and graphs and ideas so you can remember. The first category are those who meet the requirements of being obligated to fast. What are those requirements? I just went over them in the beginning, right? How many did we cover?
5.
Come on, guys, come on. How many? We covered 5 with 2 under 1, right? So technically you could even take it to 6, but 5 is correct, right? Those were the precondition, being Muslim, right? Muqallaf and Qadir and free from Nifas and Hayd and Muqim, right? And then under Mukallaf we went Aqil and Baligh. So just you make a graph, draw it out, remember it, so you can always learn it. I used to make these graphs myself when I was studying in Mustalah al-Hadith and Usul al-Fiqh, and what I would do is I would always have like a little notepad with me. And anytime I was waiting somewhere, I would just sit there and make out the graphs from memory to keep it fresh in my mind. So that is the first. The first is those people that fulfill those requirements, meaning that fasting is obligatory upon them. What's upon them? Is to fast. What should they do? Fast. Tayyib. If somebody knows this, I'm going to get a little different mas'ala right now. If somebody knows that fasting is fard, every Muslim inshallah should know fasting is fard. And they don't have an exception here. And they say, you know what? I don't need to fast. And this is kufr. If they leave fasting due to laziness, yani they do believe it, they think we should, but yani they're a little bit off, then they are major sinners, but that's not kufr. So, but to say, yeah, who cares about fasting? We don't need to fast. This would be kufr. May Allah protect us. Tayyib. The second category are those that don't meet that category, but could fast. Okay? What does that mean? Let's say somebody is under bulugh. Right? We discussed this. Right? Let's say there's a 10-year-old and he's not baligh yet. Right? But as we mentioned, that you should be encouraging them to fast, so they can fast. And they will get the reward of the nafil. And inshallah the parents will get the reward for encouraging their children. But in that case, if they didn't fast, would we consider them to be sinners? But could they fast? Yes. If somebody has weakness of aql, maybe they are challenged some way, mentally, but so then we say Allah does not obligate them to fast. But let's say, being encouraged by others, they want to fast, right? Can they? Yes, but it's not an obligation on them. So these are now 2 categories. You guys understand? The first, who meets those requirements, they must fast. It's not لا إكراه في الدين, and there's no force in religion. لا. And once there's no force, meaning nobody's going to force you to become Muslim. But when you're Muslim, there are things that are obligatory on you. And under the Khilafah, if a Muslim doesn't fast in Ramadan without proper reason, without a shari'i reason, they can be punished. And they should be. Tayyib. The third category are those who cannot fast. They should not fast. Okay? Here, we'll go back to the matan a little bit. وَمَنْ أَفْطَرَ لِكَبِيرٍ أَوْ مَرِيضٍ. So there is the iftar for the one who is either old, and old in the sense that they are physically unable to fast, or they are sick with a sickness that again, Allah can cure everything. Like, when we say uncurable, people are like, oh, Allah can cure anything. No doubt to that. But the Sharia ahkam are not dependent on miracles. We talk about just the regular life, right? So we don't see a way for them to get better. Okay? For example, may Allah protect us all, but if somebody has type 1 extreme diabetes, right? Type 2 diabetes, maybe you could maybe get better from, but type 1 is genetic, it's difficult. Again, Allah can cure you, but usually that's a case where you don't see them getting better. Or somebody who has terminal cancer, or somebody who has, may Allah protect us from all these, right? So if somebody is either so old that due to the frailness of their body they cannot fast, it will physically harm them, or they have such a sickness that they do not seem that they will be getting better from, and fasting, and this is in the sharh of the matan here, I'm kind of combining, and the fasting will be harmful to their sickness. That's very important, yarhamakallah. Because what happens, sometimes somebody has arthritis, right? Arthritis is joint pain, and maybe you could get better from arthritis, but many, especially if it's advanced and stuff, they just give you pain medication. There's not really any medication for it, right? So let's say that it's a very bad arthritis. It doesn't look like it's ever going to get better. You're managing it. You could take your pain medication before iftar and after maghrib, so you're okay. But you're like, no, I'm sick. I'm not going to fast. No, you have to fast, because fasting does not harm your sickness. طيب? So in such a scenario, you would have to fast. But let's say the person, may Allah protect us, has, like I said, type 1 genetic diabetes, and it's very strong, and if they don't eat, then the insulin levels go off, and they got to take their medication, and so on. Here, if they did fast, it could kill them, for example, right? Or somebody who's very old and frail, and the doctor tells them, if you fast, you'll die. And they're like, no, I'm really pious, I'm going to fast. La. Here, in these scenarios, you should not fast. What should you do, as is in the matan, and based on, we have a hadith and ayat, and we'll talk about that. And the hadith of Ibn Abbas, for example, in Al-Bukhari is clear about this, that if somebody is a Shaykh al-Kabir, in the words, we talk about Shaykh today like a scholar, but Shaykh really means somebody old. Al-Kabir meaning that their age is very high, so that's not just somebody who's old. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu mentions this, that what do they have to do? They have to feed a poor person per day. Tayyib. What does that mean? Do they have to make up that fast? Well, how are they going to make it up? There's no, you don't see a time where they're going to get better. That's the whole point. You don't get younger. You're not going to find the fountain of youth, right? You're not going to miraculously, again, it could happen if Allah wills it, but usually once you have terminal cancer, you don't really go back from it. So in that case, they don't have to make up those fasts. They should not fast, it will harm them, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not order us to harm ourselves. But what do they do in this case scenario? And this is two scenarios in one. This category, this is the third category of people, they will do what? They will feed a hungry person per day that they don't fast. Tayyib. So, what does it mean feed? It's going to go by urf and adat of your land. Right? Meaning, and this is the very beautiful practical aspects of Sharia. If we were to say, feed a poor person means like what they had in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 2-3 dates and water, and that would be very difficult today, because none of us eat 2-3 dates and water for iftar, and then that's it. And we'd eat that, then we make salah, and then come back and have a 7-course meal. So that is not the iftar that we would have today. Okay? Now at the same time, us in America, a meal, a drink, maybe a little side dish, this would be our regular iftar here. If we obligate that on everybody, then people in countries where they can't afford such a thing would not be able to. So what is the Shari'i hukam? You have to feed somebody one meal. One meal per day that you miss, and it should be somebody who is needy. You don't go to any rich people and give them a meal and think this is it, right? Should be, but inshallah later we'll talk about miskeen and what is the hukm and things on that. We'll talk about that later in the dars. This will be a makeup for those two categories, which are people that are advanced in age, they're old to a level where they're unable to fast physically. Not just old, but if you're old but you're in good shape, you can still fast. But if you are physically unable to, or sick in a way that by all likelihood is unrecoverable, you don't see recovery in sight. Meaning it's not that you have a cold or COVID or malaria or anything else that you could get better from. Rather you have something that either is terminal or it is something that you don't see recovery coming from, and that sickness is affected by your fasting. Tayyib. Then there is a fourth category, and I'm just going to summarize these here. We'll go into the matan more later inshallah. Where it is better not to fast, but they could fast. So you see, the first category was who has to fast. Second category was who doesn't have to fast, but they could. Third category was those who should not fast, and they will feed a hungry or a needy person per day that they miss. This fourth category are those who could fast, but it's better for them not to. Here we have the sick who could fast with some hardship. Hardship to the sickness. Tayyib. What does that mean? Let's say you have a toothache, right? Your tooth hurts, but you don't have to take pain medication. You don't really have anything that stops you from fasting. But you're like, I don't feel good. I'm not going to fast. Or you have a headache. Well, I think we all have headaches in Ramadan, right? Especially those of us that are caffeine addicted, right? So you have a headache. You're like, I have a headache. I'm not going to fast. La. You still have to fast. Right? This is a trick people play nowadays. Chew. Oh, I'm not fasting. Like, oh, easy, right? If you have a sickness that is affected by your fasting, okay? Meaning the doctor tells you got to take these antibiotics 4 times a day. So what should you do? Ask the doctor, is there a different antibiotic that I could take twice, to the 2 ends of the day? Don't just be like, whoa, that's it. No, you try to work out that is there a way that I can still take my medication but fast? If you can, you should. If you're not able to, the doctor tells you, no, you have to take it 4 times a day. Here now, you have the rukhsa. You can leave off fasting because you have a sickness that you will recover from, insha'Allah, but it stops you from fasting. But in this case, if you say, you know what, I'm going to push the antibiotics out a little bit, I'm going to take that chance because I don't see it, like it's not going to kill me, and I'm going to go ahead and fast. You could. Right? We don't say, no, you must, because here it's not going to kill you. It's not going to severely damage your health, right? Like the earlier conditions. So here, it's okay for you to fast, but it's better not to. Because when you're given a rukhsa, you should take it. Right? But in this case, it's not wajib. It's not obligatory that you don't fast. You guys got that one? Tayyib. Under this category are also those who are travelers. Those that are traveling. If you are traveling, then it is from the... You want to go more into adillah of these things or no? You guys good? Right? Like for example, when we talk about when we said the person whose health will be harmed shouldn't fast, la darar wa la dirar. For example, the hadith here, clear dalil, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbids us from killing yourself, clear dalil. From the maqasid of sharia, you don't kill yourself, clear adillah. So this should be easy for the brothers, but inshallah if you want to go into it. Tayyib. When we talk about traveling now, so here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the hadith reported by Jabir radiyallahu anhu, it is muttafaqun alayhi in Bukhari and Muslim, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, "Laysa min al-birr as-sawm fi safar." It is not from piety or righteousness to fast while traveling. Okay? But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself fasted during traveling. So what does that tell you? That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it due to his abilities upon himself and to show jawaz, that it is permissible. But he told us that it's not from birr, it's not from piety, to show that it's better not to. Okay? So now, when we talk about being patient during sickness, like we mentioned that as well, right? There are adillah where Rasulullah would tell the Sahaba that I can make dua, cure you, or you can be patient. So meaning it gives you that choice. So if it's not going to kill you, you could be patient and not fast, but because of la darar wa la dirar, it's better you don't fast and take your medication on time. Tayyib? For travelers, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam fasted while traveling. So you cannot say a traveler cannot fast. But in many ahadith, and I just gave you one because muttafaqun alayh, but other ahadith where Rasulullah saw the people fasting, he said, do they mean piety by this? This is not piety, and Rasulullah broke his own fast to show the people that you should break the fast. Why? Because it gets difficult. Some people, they start out, I'm hardcore, whatever, I'm gonna fast even if I'm traveling, and then they become sick, and then they miss the rest of Ramadan and Taraweeh, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was able to take those things. So if you are able and you want to, and you're fasting while traveling, nothing wrong with that. So you could. And let's say you say, I don't want to make up after Ramadan, I'm good, I'm just gonna fast. Go ahead. But what's better? You don't fast as a traveler. Tayyib. For this category, which is the fourth category, which has two things as well, which is the recoverable sickness and traveling, better to break, permissible to fast. If you do break, what do? Feed the hungry? La. You got to make it up. Feeding the hungry was for the ones that don't see health coming back. Right? So you're not going to get younger. Your terminal cancer is not going to go backwards, illa masha'Allah, except by the will of Allah. So in those cases, you can't make it up, so you feed the hungry. In these cases, you cannot feed the hungry. You cannot be like, I was traveling in Ramadan, I don't feel like making up, I'm just going to feed the hungry, as many Muslims do. La. Here you have to make it up yourself. When you get better by the will of Allah, when that sickness is gone, when you're no longer traveling, you make it up. Tayyib. We'll talk about pregnant women and breastfeeding next because I know that's going to come up. The fifth category are those people that it is equal, better or not better, to fast or not fast, depending on their condition. And here we have the category of the one who is pregnant or breastfeeding. Here, if they have a need, meaning that they fear for their health or the health of their baby, then they can leave off fasting. Right? But if they are able to fast, like there is no harm, like somebody is in their first trimester of pregnancy and their alhamdulillah, doctor tells them that they're okay, their health-wise they're good, it's not going to affect the baby, they should fast. Okay? And here, if they see it not as a harm to the baby or themselves, where it will be an extreme harm, and they fast, nothing wrong with that. If they decide that the harm is such that they are unable to handle it, then Allah makes this easy for them. And the hadith of Ibn Abbas that we'll discuss in detail in the next dars, we talk about more about makeups, we'll discuss about this issue, shows us that they can leave off fasting. Equally, it's up to them based on their situation. What will they do? They will make up the fast. And there are some scenarios, and we'll talk about this in the next dars inshallah, where they will make up the fast and feed a hungry person, inshallah ta'ala. The sixth category, and the last of what we will discuss today inshallah, are those who it's better for them to fast, but they have the permissibility to break it. Meaning, if you are a muqim, and now you go out to be a traveler. You know you're going to travel that day. You set out the day fasting. You start fasting. You're muqim, you're fasting. Then you travel. Right? Now you are out of your city limits, so now you are musafir. Here, it's better for you to complete your fasting. But you can break it because the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, this is regarding Fath of Mecca, and the hadith is reported by Imam Muslim in his Sahih, where kharaja amal Fath Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam Mecca, and it was in Ramadan, and he was fasting until he got to a certain place, and then seeing the hardship on other people, he broke the fast. He called for a thing of water and drank it where the people could see, so he broke the fast. So in this case, we see the permissibility of it. But if we look at fasting itself and other hadith, it's best to continue the fast unless you see a hardship. Tayyib. In this case, what will you do? You will make up that day, right? Because you became musafir. One last thing before we end for today. Let's say you're in San Diego and you know you're going to travel today to LAX and then you're going to fly to the Bahamas, vacation, mashallah, halal vacation. You're still in San Diego, it's Ramadan, but you're going to travel. Can you not fast? Can I have breakfast at home and then go to LAX? Why not? I'm not going to fast, I'm going to travel. You're correct. You cannot not fast while you're still in San Diego. Even though you have the niyyah for safar. And people do this all the time. And I've seen it, different people in different areas, right? They think, I'm going to travel today anyway, so right now I'm going to have breakfast at home because today's not a Ramadan day. La. Because the illah, the reasoning for the rukhsa has not come in yet. Tayyib. So that means while you're in San Diego, you have to be fasting because you're still muqim. When can you break that fast? Excellent. When you leave the buildings of your city. When you go past the buildings of your city, this is when you can make qasr, this is when you can make jam'ah, this is when you can break your fast. As long as you're within the buildings of your city, you are muqim. Tayyib, if I want to travel from Claremont to Escondido, not sure exactly how many miles that is, but right? Now, city of San Diego is a separate city. City of Escondido is a separate city. But where am I going from Claremont to Escondido? Tayyib? So when I leave the buildings, and I'm only going to go for 2 days, meaning it's going to be less than 4 days. When I leave these buildings of San Diego, can I break my fast? No, my trick question, I didn't get you guys. Why not? Distance is not enough. It has to be a safar that would permit you to make jam'ah and qasr. So in the other case scenario, let's say I'm going to go from San Diego and I'm going to fly out of LAX and go to the Bahamas as soon as I leave San Diego city limits. Because nowadays the buildings don't stop. In the old days you would have the buildings of the city and then you would go out and there'd be empty spaces. But now you can drive from here to like Santa Barbara and it'll be all built. But the point being, when you leave your city limits, then you become a musafir. Tayyib, inshallah. We'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala. We'll pick up in the dars in the next Wednesday, inshallah.